Imagine a technology that's so innovative that it changes human history forever. It's a technology that has the power to influence people's thoughts, and it holds such sway over people that it almost appears to be magical. It has the power to affect how past events are remembered. It can even influence the future by planting ideas in people's minds. It can induce certain behaviors. It can change what people believe, whether it's true or false. And it can change their moods. It can bring joy. It can create anxiety. It can bring alarm. It can induce despair. Imagine that technology. Now, at first, this technology is wielded by a select few who seem to understand its power and how to decipher its meaning. Most times, those holders of power use it for good. Sometimes they use it for evil means. So what's that technology? It's not what you might be thinking. It's the written word. Though literacy is universal in our days, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and certainly in the early times when writing was first invented, it was mysterious. It was indecipherable to the vast majority of the population. People could not read. It could capture thoughts. That was magic. And then someone could look at those symbols, wherever they were written, and turn them back into thoughts, tell you what someone had been thinking centuries ago, perhaps. It was written on clay tablets or the walls of temples. Words were written on objects. And when the object was worn by the bearer, it might give them special protection, or if something was written and dropped in someone's house, it could curse the house. Amulets with words inside of them were put on the doorposts of homes. Incantation bowls, and they've discovered, these archaeologists have dug them up, bowls with incantations written in a circle around the bowl, could protect or harm depending upon what was written with words in those bowls. Some writing was deemed sacred. It was the words of the gods. Only the specially initiated could receive that message, and they would turn what they heard into writing. And that writing was preserved from one generation to the next, magically. Kings recorded their words on stone pillars. They became eternal embodiments of the king's wisdom, power, and sometimes justice, the king's victories over nations, the king's losses sometimes. And the more ancient a text was, a written text, the more it was venerated. So the wisdom or the mythology of one generation became the sacred possession of subsequent generations. Enter onto the scene us, we Jews, the people of the book, the people of the written word. We immerse ourselves in texts even today that are hundreds of years old, thousands of years old. Their resonance, their influence, their significance, well, it continues to rebound for us. And so does the controversy brought by some of those words written into that ancient text. God's name, inscribed in those texts, spoken rarely, had even greater power once it was written down. If it was inscribed on a document, that document couldn't be destroyed. We have the Cairo Geniza, repository of documents where the holy text was written on them, sometimes not even God's names, but how much the more so if God's name was on the text, it was kept and put in the Geniza. It was etched into amulets. The mezuzah has words of Torah inside. It protected the home. It was marked, it could have been, the story goes, written on the forehead of a creature made of clay, and once written, that creature could come to life. At least that was the medieval mythology. Torah was ancient and mysterious. It was written. It elevated its holiness because it was the inscribed, as they believed, brought perceptions of infallibility because it was the initiated taking God's word, writing it down. The text is so sacred, we still keep it sheltered in a special spot in our sanctuary. When it comes to the congregation, we reach out and we touch it. It's written word. And we say the blessings before we read those words, as Laura, you're going to do tomorrow in synagogue. It took us over 2,500 years to recognize some truths about Torah that eluded our ancestors. We recognize today that they're the reflections of human interpreters, of human minds, products of history, often reflective of the heights of human accomplishment. Some of the principles in Torah we still aspire to achieve. And sometimes they reflect values, the words of Torah, that are contrary to our own, and we have to work through that. And so, because of modernity, our relationship with sacred text has changed because we see it as a product of history but still sacred. But recognizing that, and recognizing that our understanding of it has changed, we're willing to question it, to challenge it, to contextualize it, to reject it, or to reframe it from our contemporary viewpoint. And yet we know still that for most religions, the power of that ancient word continues today, whether it be Torah, New Testament, or Quran, and that those words hold such sway over some believers that it can tragically breed intolerance, oppression, and violence, and even war. That's the power of the written word. So the written word, even today, ancient or modern, can truly still move mountains. Tell you about that to remind you of an ancient technology, because I want to talk about a modern technology right now that has equally more disruptive and more powerful, might have an equally more disruptive and more powerful effect, even in the written word. And it's spreading right now before our eyes, and it also has mysterious origins. Even its creators aren't quite sure how it actually works. It's ubiquitous. We've all encountered it in a variety of platforms and formats. It has the capacity sometimes, and it can fool us to appear human. It appears to think when we engage, when we interact with this modern creation. And its qualities, those qualities of humanness, reflect its power and its danger in our generation. And at the same time, despite all this, we can't avoid it. We need it. It won't go away. It's vital. It can even be life-saving. But its power for harm cannot be understated. I'm talking about artificial intelligence. We have to recognize it. It's not the stuff of computer geeks or techies, folks. It's everywhere. It influences your internet searches. It's watching you. It records what you look for in previous searches. And if different people ask the same exact question, it can provide different answers based on their past searches and their profiles. It's been affecting your social media feed, your so-called news that appears when you open your web browser, for years. It's getting better and more powerful. It will drive our cars. It already drives some of them, not without controversy. You've already received letters and texts and emails that are generated by the brain of a computer. And it is, of course, the maddening encounter we have with customer service, where it tries to interpret what we say and never quite gets it right, although you'll notice it's getting better than it used to be. It will at some point diagnose medical conditions, and perhaps it will even perform surgeries. It might even, well, actually, in some cases it does provide mental health counseling. I read today about how you can use artificial intelligence to be a life coach. Frightening. And most significantly, it can and it will edit and create videos. This is where it becomes important. It will write articles that appear to be news. It will retouch photos that now no longer we can count on as reflections of reality. It literally can put mouths in the words of public speakers. And most of us will not recognize its deception. But unlike the trajectory of written words that took us thousands of years to recognize and see it as a product of the human mind, we can't wait thousands of years for artificial intelligence, because history is accelerated in our time. Things happen much faster than they did in the ancient world. We've got to harness the power, recognize the danger, and be aware of the impact of artificial intelligence today. Karl Marx famously recognized the power of religion to lead and mislead, to comfort and disturb. Well, if religion could do that, computer brains are nuclear-powered opiates like that. It will change the way we work, it already has, the way we do business, the way we consume information, the way we interact with our world, and few of us will be aware of when it's happening and when we're experiencing it. And here's the truth also. Because profit often is the motive for those who use artificial intelligence. We can't trust them to take our best interests at heart, unless, of course, we're stockholders in the companies that are pushing out the artificial intelligence. We have to recognize that it will manipulate us, that it will exploit our gullibilities, that we will be duped if you haven't already been duped by artificial intelligence. But here's the good news, and there is some. We're not defenseless. We have resources. We have each other, and that's what we have to rely on. Because if we engage each other properly, we can at least work to insulate ourselves against some of the most pernicious effects of artificial intelligence. To avoid falling down that rabbit hole of misinformation, we need to check ourselves. To check ourselves not by looking for more artificial intelligence sources, but by talking to people, by asking our friends who don't think like us what they're finding, by comparing what they find in their different searches to what we find in our searches, and then seeking second and third opinions as well. Listening to others can shelter us and shield us. Because whether it's on your screen, your phone, your mailbox, you have to remember that if something doesn't make sense, or if it's too good to believe, it probably is something you shouldn't be believing. And as communities with power, we have to push for more regulation. We have to, because government is way behind on this one. Government has virtually dropped the ball. And left to their own devices, corporate America will not serve us well here. So I read an article in The Atlantic by Associate Editor Adrienne LaFrance, and thought it was particularly compelling, and she inspired me with her words, so I want to share what she wrote. A future in which overconfident machines seem to hold the answers to all of life's cosmic questions is not only dangerously misguided, but it takes away that which makes us human. In an age of anger and snap reactions and seemingly all-knowing AI, we should put more emphasis on contemplation as a way of being. Kind of what we do in here, stepping outside of the world and letting our brains work. She goes on. We should embrace an unfinished state of thinking, the constant work of challenging our preconceived notions, seeking out those with whom we disagree, and sometimes admitting that we still don't know the answers. In short, now these are my words, we can't afford to be complacent or lazy. We are being watched. And I don't mean by the cameras in this room, I mean by our internet engagement. So we have to be astute consumers of knowledge. And just as from the first days of the written word, it's incumbent upon all of us to be passionately committed to the pursuit of truth.